What are some pieces of advice you'd have about how to build relationships?
Really making it purposeful. I do something called M&Ms with Melissa. I have a cart
There you
and
go.
it's got a little M figurine. I've got some light up M&Ms that lights up and flashes. And I take that out and I go round and I
That's
just say,
amazing.
"Hey, I'm
I
Melissa.
love
I'm your chief nursing officer. Tell me about yourself. How long have you been here?"
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the CNO podcast. My name is Dave, and I'm really excited to be with you today with a special guest of ours, Melissa Rouse, who has found homes in a lot of different coasts. She likes to stay near bodies of water, which is great. So do I. She's got a nice tan to prove it. But we're really excited about the talk with Melissa. She's had a long and amazing career in a number of different, really amazing facilities. And so she's going to bring us a ton of interesting information today and really kind of get into details about her career, some of the problems she faced, how she solved them and why, and then any advice she has for current CNOs and aspiring CNOs.
And I'm Roseanne Rosso, and David and I will be talking to Melissa. I am, well, I should say I was a chief nursing officer for 25 years in 5 different hospitals. So I certainly know the role, and I am really looking forward to talking to Melissa. Melissa is currently the chief nursing officer of Northeast Georgia's Gainesville campus. And I think you've had that job for about 18 months. Is that right, Melissa?
That's correct.
And I was introduced to you by Stuart Downs, who is the CNE for the system. And you wrote an article with a few other people on him, which was submitted and accepted by nursing management. So I know you from there as well. And Stuart told me you are taking nursing to a whole new level.
I love it.
So you have an interesting educational background. So your master's is as a CNS and you have a PhD, all from University of San Diego. So, and you have many, many more initials after your name, including being certified in as a nurse executive and in quality as well. So you have such a well-rounded background before you came into the CNO role. I'm excited about talking to you. You've even had a background in research, so lots to talk about. So let's begin.
I'm really, really excited to chat with you. So we always like to start at the beginning, and it's always just interesting to me because CNOs, right? The CNO position, you're an executive, you're managing hundreds or thousands of nurses. You have a lot of downward managing to do, cross-functionally managing up budgets, things like that. A lot of kind of corporate America things, which I think is like when you start off as a nurse, which is how all CNOs start, they don't like any of that. And they say, I want to go to nursing because I want to care for patients and not deal with all this stuff. And so to me, it's just really amazing that CNOs have the ability to be excellent at two completely different things. And so I always am just interested to talk with people about how they started. What got you interested in nursing in the first place?
So I actually thought I was going to be a doctor really my whole younger life. And through high school, I thought I was going to be an OBGYN. I actually started down that route at the University of California, San Diego. I was a biophysics pre-med major, which was very overwhelming. And as I started getting into that, I thought, I don't know that this is the right career path. And my mom actually said, "Well, what about nursing?" And I really didn't have a lot of context in nursing. I didn't have any family members. My only real experience was my father actually passed away when I was 17 unexpectedly. And I did spend quite a bit of time at the hospital. And honestly, it wasn't the greatest experience. The nurses were not very caring. We felt like we really had to advocate constantly. So I didn't really have a great opinion of nursing. But nonetheless, she said, I really think you would be good. From everything I hear about that, you should look into it. So I started looking into nursing, met with some folks at the university and decided, let's check this out. Let's see if this is something that I'm interested in. And so I switched gears and started doing my prereqs to get me into nursing school. And then as I was at San Diego State in their nursing program, I started working in the emergency department, really kind of went to them and said, I have no experience, but I'm in nursing school and I really want to be a nurse now. And really the only context I have is the emergency department from the show ER, of course, right? And
There we go.
that was very popular when I was in high school and in early college years. And I thought, well, ER's got to be the place for me. And I found my home. I was just so excited to be there. I worked as a tech and a secretary while I was in nursing school. And at that time, this was 96, there really wasn't a significant nursing shortage. They really weren't hiring new grads in places like critical care and the emergency department. And so I went to my director and I said, I have a deal for you. If you'll take me for an extra class while I finish up my last semester, you can really orient me the whole time I'm a student. And then when I graduate, you won't have to pay me for orientation. It'll be great. And so she said, well, let me think about it. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So I started in the emergency department. It was certainly my love for many years. I love the unexpected that happens every day, and that certainly translates into my CNO role. Every day I come in, I have no idea what kind of fires I'm going to be putting out or what's going to pop up throughout the day, but I multitask very well. I know what needs to get done and am able to get it done. So I think that that was really a foundation for where I am today.
Well,
That's great.
that's great that ER is your foundation. And I love that story of how you negotiated your role as a new grad. I think negotiation skills also come in pretty handy as a chief nursing officer. So well done there. So in between ER and becoming a CNO, there was a lot in between. But when did you become a manager? Like how and
Yeah.
why
So
did
it's
that happen?
kind of an interesting journey. So I've always found myself in leadership positions in middle school and in high school and in college. And so it didn't take me long to step forward and start taking on some leadership positions while I was a staff nurse. So I was a trauma nurse team lead and I was a charge nurse and, all of those types of roles. And then I moved into a leadership position that we called a clinical lead. So it's sort of like an assistant nurse manager. And then from there, it was just kind of stepping stones into different positions. Along the way, I actually was in that assistant nurse manager role at one facility. I moved to another organization that the title was called supervisor. So it was a shift supervisor doing hiring and coaching and, discipline and running things with the budget. So it was really a nice introduction to management. But from there, my career kind of took a little bit of a turn. I had an opportunity to go back to school to get my master's. I had a really innovative nurse executive in my organization who was a clinical nurse specialist. She knew the value of CNSs with the focus on safety and quality. And so she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, I've been watching you. I see what you're doing, what your interests are, how you're able to really solve problems and address issues. And I think this would be a great program for you. So I was incredibly blessed. I was able to move into what was called a CNS scholar position, which meant I was in the CNS role while I was in school at the University of San Diego getting my CNS. So that kind of introduced me into more and more leadership roles as things advanced.
Well, I'm thinking how you keep straddling like leadership and clinical.
Yes.
And you're, halfway through your career journey in this story, and you're still straddling clinical and leader roles. But you end up going into more on the leadership side. I guess I have a question about, was there anything surprising to you about the management piece versus the clinical piece, or did it just come naturally to you?
Think it came pretty natural. And I like that you shared that kind of straddling because that is who I am. I always have a foot in the clinical side, what's happening with the patient, what's happening with the staff, how do I make things better for the staff? And that's kind of always been who I've been in my nursing career. And so moving into the CNO role just kind of made sense. It was just really being able to improve the environment for my staff, improve the environment for patients, to advocate for both of them, at the highest level in the organization. And so it just has always kind of been a natural fit. So finding myself into this role is really not a surprise at all.
So you're still straddling that, and that at least you're thinking it makes you a better CNO,
Yes.
along with the other things like negotiation and ER skills. So, you're setting this whole foundation here for being a CNO. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So we have a lot of listeners who want to be CNOs someday. Things did you do that really positioned you for being a chief nursing officer?
I think relationships, building relationships was really critical. People do tap you on the shoulder from time to time and ask you to stretch yourself. And I think you have to be brave to stretch, to say, yes, let me go check this out and see what it is. One of the beauties of nursing is there are so many things that we can do. And I've really taken every opportunity that's come down the pipe to step into different realms. I worked in quality and regulatory, and that gave me that foundation. I worked with our disaster preparedness. It gave me that foundation, which I would later use in the COVID pandemic as I was sitting in a leadership role. So I just think really building those relationships where people trust you and pull you into projects and being open to lots of different opportunities and just learning along the way. And then now, as I sit in this seat, I call upon all those things that I've had for experiences along my career journey to help
That's
me.
great. What are some pieces of advice you'd have about how to build relationships? And one thing that I think of is I have a nurse that I work with, and every month she just sends me a text or email and says, "Hey, just want to let you know I'm thinking about you and thanks for everything." She has never asked for one thing from me, but for 2 years she just tells me how much she's thinking about me, and how and anything that I do good that she mentions it, or if there's she doesn't live near me, but if there's something happening in the Bay Area, she says, "Hey, is everything okay out there?" But then she has become the person that I go to whenever I have a special role or something, because I want to give so much to her because she's proactively given something to me. And that's just been a real takeaway. If you want something, just give, and then people will give back. But I'm just curious, what are your pieces of advice for building relationships?
I think it's a lot about what you're saying, being that person that people know who you are. I think you have to be solid in this is who I am every day, all the time. If you reach out to me, I'm going to be there to help you. And likewise, I'm going to reach out to you and we're going to get things done. And I think it's building that relationship that you're trustworthy, that you're solid, that you're going to follow through and being there when people need a hand. I mean, there's lots of times people reach out and they say, I don't really know if this is in your swim lane, but here's what I need. And if I can't help, I put them in connection with the right person. So I think it's about being that person that
Yeah.
is always there and is stable
Yeah.
and trustworthy.
Yeah. And as that's great. And part of relationships and networks they are in your geographic area. So I was curious, as I looked through your background, you're in San Diego, you're working at Palomar, you're there for 12 years, you had all these different roles. You probably knew every single person. It takes a long time to develop a mutation, right? And you're set there. And then you make this move all the way across the country where
I know.
you don't have people who maybe, will say, hey, go to school, do this thing, get all the, and I think a lot of our listeners too, they're kind of coming to a fork in the road. Should I take this role? Should I continue with my current hospital? Right. And yeah, maybe talk to me about how you made that decision, right? Because
Yeah.
what you want to step up, in responsibility, but there's a lot of unknowns that come there.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was at Palomar, before I moved to Florida, I was in a director of education position. It was actually a position that my chief nurse exec identified a need for. It didn't really exist. And she said, hey, would you be interested in X? And it was oversee all of advanced practice nurses, oversee our nursing excellence journey. You helped us write all of our magnet documents. It's continuing to oversee magnet and orientation and all of those things. And so I did that for a period of time. I was very involved with a collaborative, an evidence based practice collaborative in California. And that was made up primarily of clinical nurse specialists and educators and CNOs from all the hospitals in San Diego. And we brought our students together and taught them evidence based practice. Being involved with that network, I knew that my next step would be at that ACNO or CNO level. and nobody was going anywhere anytime soon. So I was getting the itch of, okay, what's next? What do I do? And I have an incredible mentor who I met with, and she said, I think you're going to have to spread your wings. You're going to have to go find it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. This is my whole career and these are my people. And I have this incredible network within my organization and multiple organizations. And so I have 4 children. My youngest was going to be going into 6th grade. And so I thought, maybe now is the time. And so my husband and I prayed about it, and we said, all right, let's look. But he did say, we got to be near the water because we were San Diego boaters. And so basically it was Florida and Florida. You can find something in Florida. And so I started putting out resumes. I really had my heart set on an ACNO job because I thought that's probably the next stepping stone that makes the most sense. I interviewed for some positions. I almost took a position in the American Virgin Islands as a chief
Wow.
nursing officer.
Surrounded by water.
And then I thought, talk about being isolated. That sounds very scary. But I interviewed several times with them. So I just, I put myself out there and um, wasn't getting a lot of bites for a position that really seemed like the right fit. And so then I thought, maybe I need to do something else that I'm really comfortable in. And so I started applying for director of quality positions because I thought at least I can get into a new health system, build those relationships, and then figure out where to go from there. So I ended up with an HCA hospital in St. Petersburg, Florida. I went there for a director of education interview and met with the gamut of people. And at the end of the day, the CNO and the CEO pulled me in and they said, we've really enjoyed meeting with you, but we think you're our ACNO. And I was like, what? Because
Well, there
that's
we
what I
go.
had been praying for. And I was like, my gosh, I can't wait to tell my husband and my kids. I was so excited. And so that was my ACNO journey. I was hired there. I got there and I
Usually it
thought,
doesn't happen like that. They usually kind of, at least my experience, like, yeah, I don't think you're actually qualified for this. Maybe let's give you a lower
yeah,
role. For you, they said, let's give you the bigger role. That's amazing.
yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to the journey that I've had of all the different things that I've had the opportunity to dip my toes into. And so I took the position. We moved all the way, kind of sold everything in San Diego and started fresh in Florida. My other 3 children were getting themselves established. They're a little bit older. And so we were getting them off to college and all of those things. So I started as the ACN, and shortly after I got there, the CNO left. And they said, we need you to step in as the CNO. And it was a 288 bed facility. It wasn't giant, but they didn't
Yeah.
really have shared governance. And I'm passionate about shared governance, professional nursing governance. They didn't have a really great relationship between their academic medical school kind of medical center and the nurses. And so I just felt really called that this is the place I need to be, whether I'm in the ACNO role or the CNO role. I've got some things to offer here. I've got some work to do. And so I just hunkered down and started going for it. If you're familiar with HCA, they always have a bench lineup of people. And so they sent someone in as an interim. I was in the interim role for a period of time. They sent someone in as an interim, and she actually wasn't licensed in the state. So I was still the CNO of record that was licensed as we went through multiple surveys and different things. So I got some really incredible experience in that role. And then I had an opportunity in Houston. So I started getting recruited to Houston, and I'll tell you more about that. It looks like you have another question of how I took that next step.
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I was talking with Roseanne about, she's been a CNO in 5 different locations, right? And so you have to, during the interview process, they're evaluating you, but you're evaluating them, because
Right.
if the grid isn't right with your boss, if the culture isn't right, it's just not going to work. I think Warren Buffett had a good quote that if you put a great manager in a bad environment, that only the environment will walk away with its reputation intact, right?
Right.
And Roseanne just gave me some great advice that, hey, I actually walk the halls to get a sense for the culture and the vibe. I spent a lot of time with my managers and me to make sure there was chemistry. And I'm just curious, for you, you're across the country and then up in Houston, a lot of different networks. So maybe it's hard to kind of get back channel feedback. So you really have to kind of get a sense for, am I going to work here? How did you do that? And what advice would you have for other nurse leaders as they're exploring different hospitals and seeing if they're going to be successful in a particular hospital or particular role? What advice did you have for
Yeah,
folks?
I think that's a great question. And I watched Roseanne's podcast and was like, yes, that's exactly it. Any of the roles that I have interviewed for, I love that at this level, you interview with a lot of people. It's not like you have one person and you go, gosh, I don't know if I like them or not. I met a lot of people in both of the roles after that Florida role. And what I am always looking for is, do they align with my values? Is the mission of the organization really evident? Do people know what their core values are and what the goals of the organization are? And are they really living the mission, or are they just something that lives out on the internet somewhere that people don't really actualize?
And is
And so
that do you ask those questions directly, like, "Hey, what are your values?" Or do you have a more kind of obtuse way to kind of get to that?
Well, at least when I prepare for an interview, you do lots of research on the organization, right? So you're looking at their website, you're trying to figure out everything. You're looking at Hospital Compare, you want to know what their quality scores are. I mean, really trying to figure out, what is this place? Is this a place where I could see myself? Do I have something to bring to the table to complement what's already happening? Or is this going to be a total turnaround? You have to kind of decide, what do they have? Do I have something that I can bring to the table on that? So I always go very prepared, and I know what those things are, assuming they're going to ask me, do you know what our mission is? Do you know what our core values are? So I've got those already in the back of my mind. But what I found in my current organization, and it was such an easy move for me from Houston to here in Georgia. Not one person that I met didn't say something about the core value. Deep interdependence is one of our core values. And almost every single person threw that in there somewhere when we were talking. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, this is kind of special. Something's going on here. Very focused on our mission is serving our community and, really moving to that next level, being better tomorrow than we are today. All the things that I heard in this current organization just spoke to me. And I thought, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the next step. And so I came here actually as the executive director of nursing excellence, bringing all the experience that I had in past magnet. This is not a magnet organization, but they were considering that, thinking about the magnet journey. And there was an opportunity to come in and really work with their shared governance and revamp that. There was an opportunity to create a clinical ladder and really empower the nurses. And so those were all things that I did in my prior roles, my CNO role, my ACNO role. And I thought, I'll come in as this executive director of nursing excellence and really be able to use all the things that I've had along the way in a 5 hospital system. Then a CNO opportunity kind of popped up. And so it really wasn't in the plan when I came here. I just thought, this is a great opportunity, 5 campuses, an opportunity to take another organization to magnet. So I was really looking at it from that perspective. But here I am in a CNO position.
It keeps calling to you.
It
I don't
does.
know. You can't
It
get
does.
away from it.
It does. For
That that's great. It sounds like you it's very interesting what you do. You take the answers that people are giving, the give and take in these interviews, and you frame them in your head around what you know are the values and make the connections that way. Interesting, because David was asking, so you actually ask them, like, how do you live your value of compassion? And so the answer that, at least what I understood, is that you interpret what they're saying in the context of the values to see if the connections are there or not.
yeah, for
Very,
sure.
very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was interviewed for a CNO job. It was all day long, and that was just the middle part of the search. There was a beginning and an end, but I was literally for 6 hours straight with a short break for lunch with groups of people. Doctors, nurses, ancillaries, union folks, like literally 6 different groups over the course of one day. It was so grueling, but I can relate to what you're saying. And every single one of those interviews, I felt like I connected. My values connected with what they were saying. And don't we know that when our values match our organization's values, all kinds of magic starts happening?
absolutely. Without a doubt.
I thought that was also interesting that I think that just the fact that people know the values is a nice rubric because then it shows that the organization has taken time to train people and reinforce it. Because every company has values and a mission statement, 99% of people don't even know it. And
Right.
so for a company, funny kind of side tangent, but my one of my best friends, he's a big foodie, right? And he loves Mexican food especially. And he says, whenever Mexican restaurant I go to, I always order the first thing is the chili relleno because it's a dish that's on every Mexican restaurant, but no one orders it. But if they can make a really, really good chili relleno, this dish that like no one really orders, then it means they're going to be excellent at everything. And so it's like one of these like Michelin value. Everyone has it because they kind of have to have it, but no one ever really follows it except maybe put it on a wall or something that no one reads. But like you see an organization that actually knows it and actually believes in it and puts it in great organizations. When they hire fit people, they're probably scoring you across these values. When they were giving you your review, they're probably scoring you across these values right after you're in the role. And so that, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so if if you're embedded in that system and it's an organization that's going to follow through, and much easier to be successful in an organization that already has those habits. So
Yeah,
that's
for
great.
sure.
That's great. So you've been in a lot of different roles, done a lot of different things, and have been successful in a lot of different ways. I'm wondering if you can kind of think back to your recent past. Maybe it's at Northeast in your roles as CNO, or maybe it's before in any other role. Like, can you think back? Wow, I'm really proud of this thing that I was able to do. Whether it's improving a clinical quality score, or rolling out training program, or turning around the culture. Let's kind of get into the details on one thing. And what was the problem? How did you solve it? And we can go from there.
So I think the most recent thing, we built a new tower here at the Gainesville campus, and it was a 96 bed tower. We moved our emergency department, brand new giant emergency department, moved all of our ORs over there, opened some new ones over there. So that was a massive undertaking to prepare for that. I am a big believer in you got to bring the staff to the table. I've talked about shared governance. I call it professional nursing governance, but that's really for all employees. I feel like you have to bring your employees to the table and ask them, what do you need? What's important to you? We're building this new campus. We need your input on what it needs to look like and help us design this. And so really working with an incredible team to lead that work and to ultimately open that tower. We opened it in February of this year. That was a huge undertaking. I think that as the CNO, my job was really to think about the nurses, but that's not how I function. I think of everyone and how we all interface. And, nursing can't do their jobs without respiratory and radiology and lab and our chaplains and environmental services and facilities and, dietary services. So as we prepared to get ready to go, it was very much about how do we make sure everybody knows what they need to do, has what they need to be successful, and really it can be a big celebration for all of this. So that was a huge undertaking. I'll tell you that a few months after moving into that space, we opened 4 24-bed units. We had 2 ICUs, and we discovered that we didn't need that many ICU beds. And
Mm.
real estate is incredibly valuable, right? We've got a large volume of patients coming into our health system all the time. And so we had to make a decision to merge the 2 ICUs into one and then open up another acute care unit. So navigating that with cardiothoracic surgeons and all of the intensivists and everybody that was so excited. We just given them these 2 beautiful 24-bed units. And now we're saying, well, we don't have the volume for it. The need really is elsewhere. That was a huge undertaking, and we have successfully made it to the other side. We've got a combined unit now. We've got great collaboration with the staff that's there, really building a brand new team and really helping them to manage through that very challenging transition is a huge accomplishment. It was a tough one. There was a lot of feelings and emotions, and it was a lot, but we got
Yeah.
through it.
Going back to when you said you brought staff to the table, I loved how you said it had to not only be about nursing, although, that's your primary area of accountability. It had to be about everybody. Being a systems thinker like that is just fantastic. But my question is, can you specifically think of decisions that were made for that new tower that came from staff?
Well, I think really the way that things would flow. Our staff was very involved in flow. So our emergency department, as that was being designed, we had staff at the table really talking about, what are we going to do with these different areas? How are we going to flow from the front door into triage and then into the department? And I'll tell you that we're actually still working on that. The other thing that I really believe strongly in is PDCA. You got to check everything. You can't just roll it out and say it's perfect, because it's never perfect. And so we have continued to bring our emergency department staff to the table, our unit practice councils and other key stakeholders in the ED, to look at the flow through our emergency department, the way we thought it was going to be before it's all built, right? And you see it on paper and you think you have a plan. We've had to kind of pivot, and we're going to do some minor construction to kind of change how our triage process is set up, and change the way that the patients enter the hospital. So having their input into what's working and what's not working has been critically important and valuable. I think
It's
sometimes,
interesting that your organization is willing to put in more construction to a brand new building, because in my experience, that is the last thing anybody wants to do after building a new building,
yeah,
even when it doesn't work as designed. And interesting that you brought staff to the table. And when you're building something new, we always say staff have all the answers. Well, you know what? We don't all have the answers. And I believe in those cycles of change as well. You have to iterate constantly to make things better. So that was good. I have one more question about something you were proud of, and it was about how you manage the cardiothoracic surgeons, and I don't know what other intensivists were involved in closing down an ICU. Is there like a specific thing you did that like helped to mitigate the emotions, the anger, the whatever the feelings were on the side of the intensivists and the cardiothoracic surgeons? Like, how did you do that?
listening. I
Mm,
think so. In addition to our core values, we have core competencies, and one of our core competencies is called radical listening.
mm,
And it's the idea that, people just want to be heard. You got to just
mm-hmm,
stop and listen and see what's really going on. Having one-to-one conversations with the providers. It was our surgeons, our intensivists, our advanced practice providers. They were all very shaken by this decision. And while some of them were brought to the table at the levels that make these decisions, the ones that weren't at the table initially felt like, this wasn't my decision. Why do I have to deal with this? Why didn't they ask me? Those types of things. And so I think a lot of listening and trying to figure out, what can I do to help you through this transition? How can we get to a good place in this? I apologize that you didn't have a say in it, but here we are, and this is our department together. And how are we going to make this work?
all right. So radical listening, I'm liking that concept. I might have to write an editorial about that.
Just double clicking a little bit on just bringing people to the table. Like that's a great term, but it can be a little abstract. And I'm sure some of our listeners are like, okay, well, how do you do, like, physically? Is there a table you physically drag them to? Like, what do you do? And actually has a newsletter that she's implemented in some of her roles, which are great, because then this monthly communication. I really feel like any leader, a lot of your job is communication. You are the communicator in chief, because you're at the table, the executive table, making the decisions, but people 3, 4 levels down, they have no idea why. They're not going to get bought into doing something unless you explain the why. And unless you tell them all the things that you're doing. I live near San Francisco, and our new mayor here is constantly on Instagram saying, like, look at this new restaurant that opened up. Look, during when it was raining, he was actually digging out some of the rain, the rain had like flooded certain areas. He was like digging it out to clean it up. And you're just looking at this guy on Instagram. Like, first of all, does he sleep? But he's doing so much for the city, and that builds momentum, right? And if a tree falls in the woods and no one, and you don't hear it, did it even fall, right? And conversely, you're doing all this work and making all these decisions, but if people don't know why or how, then they're not going to be bought in. CNOs, really anyone in a leadership position, how do you communicate, like, any tips, any specific things, like, oh, wow, this is something that I really love to do. This is, you got to do it. Or just any kind of general advice about how to communicate, how to bring people along, how to actually get their input, tell them you've listened to them, tell them the response, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So I think visibility is incredibly important. And I'll tell you, that's a struggle. I got a 650 bed hospital. We're giant. I wear high heels and suits, and I'm putting on the miles, trying to get out there to the units. As we were going through this transition, I spent time out on the units, talking to the staff, explaining the why, hearing their frustration. Sometimes their daggers are flying and, you're like, but let me just explain, and why is it so upsetting to you? And just really getting out there and being vulnerable and saying, I know this is hard. What can we do to make it better? And what we ended up doing, in addition to going out there, it was really important for me to set the new leader up for success. And so I didn't want them to only hear from me. I wanted to be there to hear it from me and to know that I'm supporting, but this is your new leader. And so we started an every Friday morning call, and we opened it up to both staff and the physicians, the APPs. Everyone was able to call into that call. And we prepped beforehand. And so we had the updates of what we were going to tell them and, how they were going to get the information. They had an opportunity to submit Q&A ahead of time. It could be anonymous if they wanted. And we opened it up to live Q&A. And the beginning of those calls were pretty heated. There were some pretty upset people, and we continued to try to manage that throughout the week. But as we continued, the attendance grew and the comments ceased. And so it kind of turned into we just want to now hear what's going on. Like, people had sort
Yeah.
of made it through there. So I think addressing things head on, being present, not being afraid to go out there into the line of fire. There's a lot of strong emotions. You're dealing with people's livelihood here, and what they thought was going to be their unit, and now it's not. And so it was emotional and it was hard. And so being present, I think, is really important. My other big piece of advice, not just being out and being present, but really making it purposeful. I do something called M&Ms with Melissa. I have a cart,
There you
and
go.
it's got a little M figurine. I've got some light up M's that lights up and flashes. I've got a colorful boa, like one of those boas that you wear that's a feather thing. And it's on the cart. And I take that out and I go round and I
That's
just say,
amazing.
hey, I'm Melissa.
Wow.
I'm your chief nursing officer. Tell me about yourself. How long have you been here? That kind of thing.
Wow.
And over time, I get to know people. And that's the only way I've been able to really be out there and be present, because it's hard to know this many people when I have thousands of nurses and patient care techs. And I don't want them to say, I have no idea who my CNO is. I want them to know who I am and what I'm about. And I want them to be comfortable coming up and talking to me and telling me what's going on. The other thing that I started is something called Sundays on Sunday. So, the weekend staff, they're always like, nobody cares about us. It's the weekend and they're all home, enjoying their families, and we're all here. And so I started this on a Sunday afternoon. So we started it from 4 to 8. So the day shift can come down and get an ice cream sundae and spend some time and talk with me. And then it goes into the night shift. So when the night shift's coming in, they can come early and get ice cream. Or when the day shift gets off, they can come down. And so it started with just me kind of hanging out down there with my team of elves that make everything beautiful, ice cream and all the Sunday toppings. And it was just an open session, come talk to me. I had papers on the wall, what's your favorite thing about working here and what's one thing we could do to improve. And so I just did that as the initial way to kind of just be present, and invited everybody in the hospital. And over time, that has morphed into my hospital president joining me and my executive nurse leaders that report up to me. And so now we're all there. And so it's an opportunity to come see the CNO and the executive team. And it's just ice cream. Come on down and have ice cream. We served 650
Okay.
people at my last ice cream event. So just
Wow.
it's a great way to sort of be visible. I will say people don't come and get into heated discussions with me down there, but at least they can come talk to me and say hi and know that I'm a person, so that when they do see me in the parking structure or in the hallway, they'll say, hey, do you have a second? Can I share something with you? And I'm just like, yes, that's awesome. I love that. Please come tell me, because I can't work on your behalf if I don't know what your real life is like and
Yeah.
how it is to work here and what your struggles are. So those are a couple of things that I have found incredibly helpful, to just be available.
All right, those are great, and I have a couple of questions about
Sure.
it. And everybody loves ice cream and M&Ms.
And I was just eating
So,
M&Ms just before this, so you got me.
So let's go to M&Ms for a second. In the CNO role, and talked to a million CNOs in my life, finding time for rounding is always hard to do. We're double booked, triple booked, and every time slot on our calendar. And we all talk about rounding being so important. And to me, it was like the best part of any day,
Yes.
honestly, when you get out of the office and out of the meetings and get out to the people who are doing the work and hear what's happening. And that's when you know what you really need to be working on. But anyway, how do you make time? I think that is a tactic that our readers would want to know. How do you make time for that?
It's challenging. I'm not going to say it's been easy. I put it on my calendar. I go through my calendar with my assistant. We look about a month out. And when I have open spots, I just block them for rounding. And things pop up. Someone will say, I really need Melissa for a meeting for this. And then my admin knows to say, is there another time? Let's find something else. And so she's amazing. She protects my schedule the best that she can. But there's always things that come up. And so if rounding gets taken off my calendar, then I go, okay, now what am I going to do? I got to come up with another plan. And so then I look ahead and I say, okay, what meetings do we really not have anything pressing that I need to attend? And then I start clearing it to try to make time. Any meeting that's canceled, I'm like, woohoo, I'm going out rounding. It's like a free hour. So I just try to work it in the best that I can. It doesn't always happen exactly like I would like it, but I do make it a priority. And I round on days and nights. Nights are easier because there's no meetings, right? So that's
Mhm.
really about trying to find time that I can come in a little later in the morning and stay a little later into the evening to be with the night shift staff, popping in on a Saturday or a Sunday when there aren't meetings. That's kind of my tactic of how I do that. I used to publicize it. When I first started, I would put it out, CNO
Mm.
rounding in the Green Tower on this day at this time. And one time I couldn't get out there. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. I'm not publicizing it anymore. I'm just going to go when I can so that it doesn't lead to disappointment. So
Yeah, I think the element of surprise is a good one
yeah,
as well.
it's
So
good to
that's
just see
good.
what's happening.
All right, so here's my next question. You mentioned Sundays just now, and you talked about Sundays on Sunday, and that your CEO was joining you. So I had wanted to delve into like how you do that managing up and how, I mean, if you need to have a strong relationship with the CEO or you're not going to be successful. Uh, Inviting him or her to Sundays on Sunday sounds like it was a good tactic, but what other tactics do you have for our listeners on really cementing a relationship with the CEO?
So I think visibility is important there as well, making sure that you have regular one-to-ones with them. So just to clarify, my structure is a little interesting here. This giant campus, and I have a hospital president that is my dyad partner. And then we have a system COO, system CNE, system CEO. My dyad partner is our hospital president. He and I make time to go round together. We'll schedule rounds. That's really powerful because we're kind of seeing things from different ways. And so we'll put that on first thing in the morning is always best before the day starts going crazy and you get behind. And so when we're out together, we're talking, catching up, and then it's a great opportunity for me to manage up my people. And so that's the other piece. You got to know your people, right? So I go, oh, this is Susie. She just got certified next week. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And oh, this is Johnny. He just had a new baby. And so to introduce the hospital pres to the people on my staff, it's very powerful and it gives them an opportunity not only for me to say, I see you, but I want them to see you too and to know the great things that you're doing. So
All right, so you're building on the relationships part of the work,
mhm.
which is great and sounds like what you're about. So I think all those things you describe are really culture changing in terms of caring about people, caring about relationships, listening, all the things that you mentioned, which fall under, my favorite thing, which is all things relational leadership. So I think it's culture changing, but tell me, was it culture changing? I'm imagining that it was, but was it? And was it intentional to change culture? Just tell me more about that.
So I think it is culture changing to do that, and it's slow and painful, right? It's one interaction at a time. But what I do find is that the word kind of gets out, and it's the ripple effect of I didn't get to see Melissa when she was here, but I heard she was here. It's a manager calling and saying, "Hey, my central monitor techs were so excited that you came in to see them to bring them M&Ms." It's seeing people that are kind of the hidden offices. I'll just open office doors. I'm like, "Hey, medical records, you want some M&Ms?" And they're like, "Nobody ever comes to visit." So I think it is culture changing. It's continuing with the strong core values that I saw, which was what made me choose to come here, and then continuing to really have meaningful recognition. And I think that in and of itself changes culture. We do an annual Press Ganey employee engagement survey. We do the AACN Healthy Work Environment survey. And so we have a lot of data around things. And my opportunity is really in my building here is people within that first year, right? It's that first year turnover. And really making sure that they feel seen and integrated. One of the things I'm just getting ready to start is some welcome breakfast opportunities. And I was talking with my president earlier today in our one-to-one because I feel like we got to get in front of folks when they first get here to make sure that they are having a smooth transition, that they feel welcome in this culture, that we are inclusive. And, it's hard to come into a unit that's a tight knit unit and you're the brand new person. And so it's important to me that we're building a community where we say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here, Roseanne. We go out to lunch on Fridays. Do you want to join us?" Or, our kids get together or, those types of things. And so I think it's changing culture by um, by seeing people for who they are and really recognizing them and being visible and open.
That's amazing. I can tell. I'm taking so many notes because I love all this. And it's what you do, but then who you are. I can just tell you're a very authentic leader because people's BS meter is high, and so you can go around and do something, but if people just think that it's just transactional, they're not going to buy in. But I can just tell that you actually do care,
Yeah.
right? And you actually do live by those values. So I think your team is very lucky to have you. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So we've talked about, the past and we kind of got up to the present. I know you had a big project to open up that new tower and that just shifted around and things like that. As you look to the future, because it's very hard. You can get caught up in kind of the day-to-day stuff, attending meetings, doing these things, and then you don't have time to carve out like, how do I want to leave my mark in this organization 5 years from now? What is like the big thing that I want to do in the next year or two? What metric do I want to move? What new project do I want to implement? Something that is at the top of your list right now. And then how are you carving out time to actually plan for that and stage that out? I think the advice here will be really helpful for people who are aspiring CNOs or CNOs that really kind of want to leave their mark and kind of like get above just the whirlwind of what's going on every day to really kind of make a mark.
Yeah. So I think our biggest opportunity is our patient experience. We call it human experience. We've just renamed it to human experience. Our focus is very much on connecting. The majority of, one of the unfortunate parts of my job is dealing with the complaints and the grievances. And the majority of those that I deal with when I call those patients and family members, what they say to me is, there was no communication. They didn't feel like they cared. I was just a number, those types of things. And so my work over these next couple of years is very focused on changing that. What I'm finding in the workforce, and we all hear about post COVID, but it's real. People are different post COVID. I think healthcare staff are different. Personally, I was asked to step in as the vice president for 11 critical care units during COVID. And it was something. And I just think none of us are the same because of the things we saw and the way that the society changed. And there's just a lot of different thought processes. And I don't think people are as patient and kind as they were before. And it's just been a very interesting journey. And so I think that's healthcare providers as well as patients and family members, the consumers. And so my mission is to really try to figure out how to bring out the caregiver again, that empathy and the connection and, you know, treating people the way you would want to be treated. The most powerful things that I hear are healthcare workers who end up on the other side and they have an experience and they say, wow, it was so scary. Nobody told me what was going on. Nobody told me what I was waiting for. When I asked for something, I felt like I was a nuisance. I mean, to hear our employees experience that is so incredibly powerful. And I'm trying to figure out how do I harness that and spread that so people see it all comes down to kindness and communication. So I think that is probably my heaviest lift right now is to get that, to tackle that. We are on the magnet journey. We've taken a couple of other organizations to magnet and redesignated magnet in organization. But this organization, from the time I got here 4 years ago, I've been putting the stepping stones in place with the professional nursing governance and the clinical ladder and our employee engagement and our quality. We've moved our quality and our safety significantly over the last couple of years that I've been interim in this role and now currently in this role. And so I'm really proud of that work. We'll, of course, continue the strong push around quality. Our new focus is preventing falls with injury, preventing hospital acquired pressure injuries. You know, those things will always be on the forefront because at the end of the day, it's about quality and safety. But hand in hand with that is we have to treat people well. We have to create an environment where they can heal and where they feel safe and they trust us. So that's my heavy lift currently and going forward. And that doesn't happen overnight. It is that,
Oh, that's a heavy lift. I know that lift.
gosh.
The
And
Sisyphean stone.
yeah, it's a
I'm
lot.
just curious. It's something that's like if you can't measure it, how do you improve it, or how do you know that it's being improved? What are the quality metrics that you're looking to improve to really kind of bring out that caregiver?
So we are in a transition. We just started our new fiscal year, October 1, and we are moving from the normal Press Ganey top box to Net Promoter Score. And so that was new to me. So I have had a learning curve here. Net Promoter Score is used by many organizations, not healthcare necessarily. So I think it's fairly new to us in healthcare, at least to us here in Northeast Georgia. And what we look at is the the promoters. And so those are the people that give you the 9 or the 10 on how your pet was. Then you've got the passives that are your 0 to 6s. And then your passives are your 7s and 8s. And then your detractors are your 0 to 6. Let me say that again. 9s and 10s are promoters, 7s and 8s are passives. So those are the people that go, it was okay. Like when you go out to dinner, like a 9 and a 10 is like, wow, that was amazing. And the server brought me my drink before I even asked for it. And the manager came and rounded on me. And, it's all the things, right? That's your 9s and your 10s. Your 7s or 8s, 7s and 8s are, it was good. Like for the most part, people were good. I came in for this and they did this. So it was okay. And then your detractors are your 0 to 6s. Those are, we dropped the ball somewhere. Care was good until this happened, or everyone's been great until I had this respiratory therapist, or I had this nurse, or my food was cold and I asked for it and they didn't bring me that meal, or it's those things. So that is how we are measuring how we're doing right now with our patient experience, our human experience. And so we have started something called Voice of the Customer in this hospital. So my nurse leaders do nurse leader rounding in the morning. So the nurse manager, that's their role. They're out on the unit, they're rounding on 100% of their patients. They have a kind of a script of how are things going. They can tell when they go in, did my nurses do bedside shift report? Did they take care of your needs? Did they tell you what the plan was? Did they ask you what your plan for the day was? What's your goal? What's most important to you? So they're measuring those things along the way. And while they're having those conversations, they're getting a feel. Is this going to be a 9 or a 10? Is this going to be a 7 or an 8? Or is this going to be a 0 to 6? And so they take that information and they try to address things real time. So if we drop the ball on whatever, the bathroom didn't get cleaned, they're immediately calling EVS. I need you to please come down here and, go through this room and get it cleaned up. So they're trying to address issues immediately. But if they've got those detractors, those 0 to 6s, those aren't super easy to fix. There's usually a little more than just one thing that didn't go right. So when they come to voice of the customer at 12:30, each of the managers, we go around and they say, I rounded on 30 of 32 patients. I had 18 promoters. I had 3 passives, and I had however many is left of these folks that were in this 0 to 6 category. And my directors then connect with those patients. So the expectation is then the directors go and say, Melissa was your nurse manager. She shared with me that you had these experiences. I just want you to know we're following up on this, this, and this. What else can I do? How can we improve this? So we have a lot of work going on around that. And so we are using those moments to look to see what's the quality, what's happening with that human experience. And then of course we're checking the board all the time. We look at our Press Ganey results and they do give us a net promoter score. And so we're watching that very carefully. 2 more 9s and 10s came in. Yay! 5 detractors came in. Okay, we've got some more work to do. So it's very easy to see those numbers come in as patients are sending in their score or their feedback and looking at those scores.
Well, you mentioned celebration for the 9s and 10s, and I'm a believer in celebrating. That is motivational. Not to everybody, of course, but it is. You have a very rigorous program going on there.
We
It
do.
sounds like an article to me.
Yes. Yeah,
So
do it. I'm always ready for another article.
you'll have to keep me updated on that. You've described so much about your journey and how every single piece of your journey really contributed to what you're doing now and what you've learned along the way. And it wasn't always in management roles. It was very different kinds of leadership so it was a very interesting journey across country, no less. And I love everything you talked about was so related to relationships and connections and people. So I got that from you. So here's my last question is what's your message for the folks listening today? One concise message that you'd like to leave everybody with.
I think the most important message, if you're thinking about being a CNO, is to know that this is not for the faint of heart. This is a hard job. We are the face of nursing. I am responsible for what 2,500 nurses do every single day, and that's a lot. That's hard. And so you have to be resilient. You have to be focused. I am focused on making things better tomorrow than they are today, celebrating the small wins, catching people doing the right thing, having an attitude of gratitude, I think takes you a long way because there's a lot of things that are going to come across your desk where our compliance wasn't as high as it needed to be on blood transfusion documentation. And we had another complaint about this. And there's those things that come in that can steal your joy. But I stay focused on I'm doing it for the patient. I'm making it safer here. I'm making a better environment for my staff to be able to provide great care to the patients. And that's what fuels me every day. That's when I wake up and say, not I have to go to work today, but I get to go to work today. I get to go make it a better place for as long as I have the opportunity to be in this role. And so I think that's important. You got to just connect to your why and the difference that you're making in what you're doing.
I love that.
I love these programs, but also that you made them alliteratives to make them more memorable. So M&M's with Melissa, Sundays on Sunday, that's just more memorable. Even when you introduced yourself to us before we started rolling, it's Rouse like house. Otherwise,
Right.
I wouldn't even remember. So
Yeah.
all these little tricks for our listeners just to make things more marketable and more memorable. I like how you're setting it in your schedule. You're not just saying, I'll get out there when I get out there. You're making it intentional. And then I love kind of looking forward. Everyone wants to improve customer satisfaction, but you have a very specific plan. You have the metrics, you have the NPS, you have a way to collect the data, you round every single day, and then you're assigning directors to the detractors to kind of bring them. So you have this actionable cycle that's happening very quickly and you're celebrating the win. So just this great complement of qualitative, but then quantitative. And so I'm extremely impressed. I think our listeners have a ton to take away or very specific stuff. I know I don't live near Georgia, but if I get sick, I'm going to Northeast Georgia. I'll give you a tag. I'll give you a tag. All day, all day. But this has been great. Thank you so much, Melissa, for taking the time. Your hospital's lucky to have you. Your patients are lucky to have you. America's lucky to have you. So it sounds like you're doing amazing work. And we're really fortunate that you spent some time with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my honor to be here. Thank you for taking time to do this interview. Appreciate it.
All
Thank
right.
you, Melissa.
Bye-bye.